no matter how hard one tries, you're preparing a presentation, you get up and you're about to talk, and everything that you planned, basically, you have to throw it out the window and just reorganize yourself as things go.
Improvise.
Yeah, to some extent. So I just, if you just humor me for a moment, I just need, there was a lot said, and based on what Bob, the note, finished on, if you think about this question of space, the question of being on the moon, for me, it shows us how humanity is still in such an early stage in its development. The fact that we're only on the first closest celestial body, right, the moon, and most of the universe has not been explored, most of our solar system or galaxy has not really been touched. For me, it gives us a sense of how young we all are, which is great, because everybody's obsessed with being eternally young these days, so I guess that's a good thing. And there's many ways that we can, because today the population is totally blinded by the culture, a culture which is dominated by sense perception. And what we mean by that is that it's dominated by the immediate feelings and impulses of everybody. It's dominated by the immediate stories that the media puts out, the narratives. Everything is dominated by a just perceptual and reactionary way of thinking. People are not actually thinking. They're just taking things in, they're taking information in, they're taking sense perceptions in, and they're trying to just, that's defining their world. So Mike Billington said in the first presentation how people so quickly fall for the propaganda against China. They're eating cats, oh my God, they're a dictatorship. And then you say, well, hang on a second, there's all sorts of different things going on. And somebody will basically say, don't you know what a dictator is? As if the word dictator defines what's actually happening in reality. They have no sense of reality, they're just reacting. So if you want to think about something like the space program, which brings into question the future of humanity, the way people think today, or don't think, a future like that is very hard to imagine. A future in space for humanity is something light years away, when in fact the jump from having a species which is totally earthbound to a species which went into the solar system with the moon landing and all that happened within a few decades. Totally changed mankind's relationship and place in the universe. So today we have a not shortage of resources, shortage of imagination, shortage of ideas, shortage of minds who can actually think about the future. And so I'm going to use this question of art, this question of poetry, to basically give a sense of how we can actually challenge people's minds, challenge their imagination. This is the purpose of great art. This is what art can do. This is what the great German poet Friedrich Schiller, which is what our organization, the Schiller Institute, is named after. He says that the point of art is to ennoble mankind. And that the thing that's unique about art is that it's not hostage to the opinions of the mass. It's not hostage to the arbitrary authority of what one critic says, or what some other modern artist thinks is art, or modern interpretations of things. Beauty is always beauty. It's something that's eternal. And this can actually be used to stir within mankind a feeling of real truth, of something that's beyond the senses, which only human beings can actually experience. So this was further in my presentation, but why don't we just start with it? I guess I would just read it, because I want to know what people think. I'm going to need your help for this. So this is Shakespeare's first sonnet in his series of 155 sonnets, elaborating a concept of humanity, which totally goes against everything that people believe in today, that people submit to. And we can do some translation or a discussion of what he's actually saying in terms of the words he's using. So, from fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste and niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due, by the grave from thee. Okay. I need to know, what do people think about this? What are people, how would people react? Yes, Evan.
To me, it feels a little bit like he's saying that, like, we set our limits on ourselves. And like the middle, it's kind of like it.
Okay, in terms of what?
Self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. So like,
what are they being cruel about though? What's the? It helps to read these things a second time. Shall we read it a second time?
yeah.
Now, from fairest creatures, we desire increase. Increase means, I should have said this. Increase means to become pregnant, to give birth. So to desire increase, the woman's womb increases. So from fairest creatures, we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. Eduardo, is that clear what he's saying?
Yeah.
What is it he's saying?
On the continuity.
Yeah, we
As
wish
if it's
we wish everyone to have kids, so by the time they get old and deceased, well, at least their heir will have the memory of them. So
Okay.
Well, as if he's saying that we wish that the most beautiful ones have children, so that beauty never dies somehow. Like they transfer the beauty to their children, etc. So through generations, as if it's a sort of discrimination. Like only beautiful should.
Only the elites, only the beautiful people get to breed. That kind of sounds, we've heard that before, but it didn't work out that well in history. So we want to give Shakespeare the benefit of the doubt and imagine he's not thinking that way exactly, like he must have some other intention. So just to reread and to continue. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. So he's talking about this idea that it's good to it's good to breed. It's good to produce children in the sense that you're actually producing something that continues after you. But then in the second quatrain, the second set of 4 lines, which starts with, "But thou, contracted thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel." Thy light's flame is self-substantial. So you seem to be as if contracted to your own eyes, to your own image of yourself. Feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. So in a sense, one's own ego is the thing keeping this person going. It's not their concern with the future as such, but really with just their own existence, their own personal individual existence. There's no regard for the future as such. and their role and their place in that future, whether they have one or not. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel, denying yourself of the natural right to to have children, to give birth, to participate in the future. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring. Herald, so like messenger, greeter to the gaudy spring, to the bright, beautiful spring. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste in niggarding. Niggarding is like being cheap. So you're wasting in being cheap, burying within thine own bud buryest thy content. So, pity the world, or else this glutton be selfish, to eat the world's due by the grave in thee. So when this person dies, what happens?
Like the meaning of their life has died with them.
So in other words, it's
What continues? Does it continue? Is there a continuation, or?
no, there isn't if the beauty is not propagated to the whole world. So it will die with the self-ego somehow.
Yeah, and in a sense, but there's even a higher.
Like, don't be obsessed with your self-beauty. Like, try to somehow propagate this idea of beauty to the world.
Well,
Otherwise,
it's-
it will die with you.
Yeah, it's recognizing that beauty dies, that beauty is transit, that beauty still fades, that no matter how beautiful any person or thing is, the nature of the universe and of mortality is such that each of us as individuals will still pass away, will still die. We won't be here forever. And so this is a big paradox for the question of human existence, of our lives, of the purpose of our lives, because we're faced with what seems like, which is a beautiful thought, that we can continue in this future and participate, not us directly personally, but there is a way. But in you recognizing that, you recognize you're accepting your own mortality. You realize that you yourself will not continue. So yes, beauty exists, but at the same time it passes away. And so how does mankind transcend that?
He considers the male just the male, no?
It's necessarily,
Center,
you need more than male to make,
I know, but it's, what self-substantial fuel heats thy life's flame, it can be, self-substantial fuel could be good too. If you...
Yeah, but in in the context that he's using it, it's obviously not a good thing. So
Cool.
the context defines the meaning that he's attributing
like
to
if
that
you're
word.
just so
wait.
obsessed with your own image of yourself, and that's basically the thing that keeps you going. You're consumed by yourself, but ultimately you will consume yourself and there'll be nothing there. So it's really a self-destructive character, a self-destructive quality.
Yeah, and he's saying like making a famine where abundance lies, because beauty is fleeting. So as you grow older, that fuel will eventually, get smaller and smaller until you have nothing, and your life will be increasingly more empty, where you could have filled it with something of a higher value.
Yeah, but the self can be the proper use of sense of perception. For instance, saving your senses instead of having them occupied and receiving and kind of blind.
But that's the
and
thing,
deaf.
that this isn't just like an ad, this isn't just like an attack ad against family planning. It's not just like, no, we need to have a lot of children bottom line. He's getting at a much higher question of human mortality, right, of what the nature of mankind really is. And this is the issue. He has 155 sonnets, which I recommend everybody go study, like their life depended on it, because in that is really contained the germ and the essence of this question that every individual has to overcome if they're actually going to be creative, if they're going to actually participate in the future. Think about the future of mankind. They have to go through a certain process themselves of recognizing this question of mortality, but this question of beauty, how these things actually work. What is beautiful about mankind? If we're all just coming and going, where's the beauty in that? Or is there a higher way to look at it?
Spinoza said that in that connection with beauty lies immortality.
Well, Shakespeare seems to go in that direction.
Yeah.
But I'm only beginning the class, so this was a good way to crack it open, but this was just to crack the class open. So, but you see how profound it is that we're still here discussing it. We could have a whole presentation just on this sonnet. And that's the thing about poetry, that it communicates way more than anyone could say in a literal fashion. Than if you just tell someone something. Poetry is not about the words, it's not about telling people something. It's actually about where the words break down, where there's a certain paradox here about beauty, because we're talking about continuing beauty, we're recognizing it continuously dies. So it seems very futile, but that's the point of poetry, because from a sense perceptual standpoint, there is no way out of this. We need a higher concept which actually resolves that. And that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do with people, is to get them to find out what's underlying how they're thinking and realize the faults in it, such that they can find a higher solution. The same way there's a higher question of mortality which needs to be resolved if we're to see the true beauty of this sonnet. So, another experiment.
Yes.
Ooh, the image. You know what? We have a better image of this. How do people see this image? Not good.
Yes, it's good.
Not bad.
It's good?
Yeah.
Oh, it's good just because I'm close, I guess. Okay, I need somebody to tell me what you see here. Can you try and get at the whole of what's going on here?
A backline.
A banquet, okay.
Yeah. Oh, this is the bank. Okay. But we see people looking in different directions,
Yeah.
and like as if everyone's
It looks
lost,
like
chaos. Like
they're negotiating. Like the people on the left
Seems to
seem
be-
to be papacy. Like they almost look like they're dressed like cardinals.
Okay, okay.
C'est comme c'était un marché. Oui.
Un marché, okay. A soup.
So there's someone mediating though, the person in between. Like there's two separate. Like what I get almost now, I've come to the conclusion that it's two sides of the church, and someone talking about maybe reunification, or it's like the East and Western Roman empires.
Okay, okay, you're really imbuing it with a lot. That could be, because we're looking at what's the intention, right? We want to know what's really going on here, because you can describe everything, right? We could, from a standpoint of sense perception, you can go through everything. This guy is so-and-so, here's his history, you know, this can go on. We could be here for a long time.
I can hear the singing of the one of them.
The question, though, is what's the idea? What's actually going on here? What is the artist trying to tell us? Because we spoke about classical music, and how today people listen to trash. They watch trash. It's all trash. And it destroys their minds. And you see that people who have been exposed to that, they can't figure, they don't understand classical art. They don't understand beauty. And when we're saying that beauty is a necessity right now, that to win this political fight, we have to get people to understand what this conception of beauty is, I was talking to a contact on the phone, and he was saying, yeah, well, you know, that sounds really nice, but you know, it really sounds like this candy-covered granola bar type stuff that you're talking about. And I said, well, look, to the extent that people say that people see this as a very like new age kind of superficial thing, you see they've never experienced beauty in their lives. They have no idea what beauty is. They're totally depraved because of the culture that they're drowning in. So let's try a second one, because you guys are struggling.
But yeah, never.
Did you want?
Well, yeah.
Sorry. Go.
Well, no, but I was just thinking that exactly it was a copy, but I don't know when it was done. But I'm sure this was done after Da Vinci's one. But it's an interesting take on it.
Okay.
I'm not.
Je l'ai presque dit, le machin de Tamise.
Okay. No, wait, t'avais quelque chose?
Je parle français.
Bien sûr. Ouais, ouais.
Ok. Est-ce que l'idée qui est cachée derrière toutes ces recherches scientifiques, est-ce que l'homme n'est pas poussé par le but de savoir que est-ce qu'il est seul même pas dans l'univers, dans la galaxie là?
Ok.
Est-ce qu'on ne cache pas quelque chose? Disons, il y a beaucoup de descendants humains et également sur le plan financier également. Est-ce que l'homme n'est pas poussé par l'idée, disons, par cette idée-là de savoir est-ce qu'il est seul dans...
Mais quand tu poses ça, est-ce que tu poses ça en référence à la peinture?
Non, pas la peinture, mais comme c'est un peu mélangé entre... Parce que on parle, disons, c'est un rapport scientifique et littéraire également.
Bien sûr, dans le fond, parce que c'est ça, on va continuer la présentation, puis j'y arrive. C'est là qu'on y va. Mais c'est pour ça que c'est important d'avoir le paradoxe qui est très tangible.
I won't say what I think, but I'll ask a question maybe.
Trouble.
In Da Vinci's one that you're going to
Well,
show,
You
right?
want to just let me show it and maybe
Well,
see
I'm
what people think?
just wondering, you know, there's a lot more people in this one, and usually it's only the apostles that you see. Why?
Okay.
Why? You know? Well,
Okay. So do people know this painting?
yeah.
Does somebody not know this painting? Please. Est-ce que tu as déjà vu...
Je le connais pas.
Tu la connais pas? OK. Ben, c'est le dernier souper de Jésus avec ses apôtres. It's the Last Supper.
Just a letter.
Pardon me?
There's some hands on the right side.
Yeah, it's maybe just a bit cut out. What do people remark about this one? Et vous pouvez répondre en français. Dans le fond, si tu n'as jamais vu la peinture, qu'est-ce que tu remarques de cette peinture? Si c'était juste comme observation générale, c'est quoi qui... Y a-t-il quelque chose qui t'attire?
Il y a quand même une discussion là, c'est heureux. Il y a une discussion aussi.
La tendresse de couleur.
OK.
Tout le monde est agité. Il y a quelque chose qui mélange tout ça.
Mais c'est ça, il y a plusieurs niveaux, parce que ça, on peut se dire, il n'y a pas de problème. C'est quand Jésus fait son annoncement, it's his announcement that somebody will betray him, qu'un de ses apôtres va le trahir. Mais même, il y a quelque chose au-delà de ça dans la peinture. C'est pas juste une question de qu'est-ce qui va trahir qui.
Parce qu'il y a la couleur.
Pardon?
La couleur.
L'arrière-plan.
C'est pour ça qu'il faut chercher, parce que le peintre, le vrai artiste, le vrai penseur cherche à communiquer un concept. Right? Il n'est pas juste là pour décrire une histoire. Tu as juste à lire la Bible si tu veux savoir l'histoire. Mais évidemment, il y a quelque chose ici. Et vraiment de faire le contrat entre ces deux, parce que je peux vous dire à ce point-ci, vous savez c'est qui lui? Pardon?
Jésus.
C'est Jésus. OK. C'est comme si on arrive presque à pas... c'est très facile à le manquer. Il y a tellement de choses qui se passent, il y a tellement d'activités et de gens que c'est même pas clair. Ici, c'est très clair qui est qui. La première chose qui nous attire, franchement, c'est Jésus qui est au centre. Et de toute la perspective, toute la peinture, sur Jésus. It's all, yeah, it's all coming on Christ. It's all centering on Christ. So, this was painted by Leonardo da Vinci, who was the master, who was a master of the Renaissance, a true Renaissance figure, a true scientist, a true artist. He really understood the human mind, which was the whole basis of the developments of the Renaissance. This was painted by a Venetian, by Paolo Veronese, who is considered a Renaissance painter, along with Titian and several other famous Venetian painters. But this one is evil. This one is totally decadent. And in fact, a funny story behind this, because Veronese was called before the cardinals, the religious authorities, and they said, you have 3 months to change this, because in the Last Supper, there's not supposed to be any drunks. There's not supposed to be a party. Right?
Midgets serving food and singers.
Right.
Is it called the Last Supper?
C'est le même tableau.
It was the Last Supper. He called it that, and because he was given shit and told to change it, he said, we'll just change the name. So they made it the Feast of Levi instead. Okay, but it was the Feast of Levi. It was another one of Levi, of Christ's feast. But the point here, see, because the question of the human mind, of actually getting at the higher principles which organize the universe and which organize the mind, is a question of recognizing the fallacy in sense perception, but to be able to see those higher principles which sense perception cannot, but the mind can. And it's the poet, the artist, it's the way they make their composition such that you trick the senses, you force the mind to come in, because the mind recognizes there's something here that doesn't fully make sense, or there's a paradox. These are the perspective. This is the perspective point for Da Vinci's Last Supper. And you see that all the perspectives, they go back to Christ, the face of Christ. Now, the conception here, because this is the Renaissance, this is the real Renaissance, and the idea in the Renaissance that emerged out of the rubble of the Dark Ages was that man is in the image of his Creator, that the principles which govern the human mind, govern the way the mind functions, and the way the universe functions, are actually coherent. They intersect. The microcosm and the macrocosm, this is how Nicholas of Pisa terms it, who Da Vinci had some notion of, was that the microcosm, the infinitesimally small, and the astrophysical, they coincide. The same principles bound the entire universe. And in Christianity, this concept, the actual Platonic true concept behind it, is that man is in the image of God, is in the image of the Creator, and that this is mediated, his relationship to the world is mediated through Christ. Christ sacrificing himself, Christ being both God and man, represents the mediation between man and his Creator, represents a certain concept of man, which is not an animal, which is not sense perceptual, but which is actually able to deal with these higher questions of natural law, of how the universe works, that man is intimately related to the creator of the universe, i.e. the principles which govern the universe, that he can know them. Because he has a same quality of godlike characteristic, which the creator fashioned the entire universe with. So everything leads back to Christ's face. Christ is the center. Here, whereas in the other one, our relationship to the world is mediated through Christ, what's our relationship to Christ in this one? We just came for the party. We heard this guy, he can turn water into wine. No wonder. We just came for the party. There's no reason. This is typically Venetian. It's totally just sense perception. He's presenting you a party with drunks, with everybody, people just having a good time, everybody's doing their own thing. And this is supposed to be his Last Supper. So you see his disregard for what humanity really is, for the true nature of man. The Venetian does not see it. Veronese has no care for that. So this is the fight. This is the fight that LaRouche, over 40 years, has been laying out as the defining question for whether civilizations develop and survive, or whether they destroy themselves or be destroyed. And so this gets into many interesting things, and we only have limited time here. But if you think about where most people are at today, they're here. They're not here. The higher question of their identity is totally dominated by sense perception. And this is what we have to destroy. Today, you have, if you think of the way people relate to each other, in terms of this idea of sense perception, what is their relationship with their friends? What is their relationship with their spouses? What is their relationship with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their teachers, their schoolmates? What defines relationships today? It's totally banalized. It's totally about entertainment, conversation, hunger, thirst, the passion which unites the two sexes. Have people heard this quote? Hunger, thirst, the passion which unites the two sexes. Do people know who that is?
Sounds like
it's not here, so
sounds like Adam Smith.
Yes, it's Adam Smith. Adam Smith was the British economist who theorized the whole theory of free trade, where, see, this question of the true nature of man, very quickly, because we're going to talk about Dante Alighieri and Shakespeare, which take on this question of what the true nature of mankind is. They're not afraid to do it, whereas most people are. Most artists today, they cannot do it, because they have no conception of mankind. They're totally degraded. And so you see that today painting is n'importe quoi, right? Just throwing paint things on a canvas, drawing whatever shapes, a human with a cow head, and that's supposed to mean something. Just totally insane. But the question of God, of what governs the universe, what are the principles that order the universe, that's what's really being called into question. And with Adam Smith, with the British Empire, what is it? Hunger, thirst, the passion which unites the two sexes. It's total sense perception domination. And what this means is that really there's nothing else you can know. From the oligarchical standpoint, all there is sense perception. What you can touch, taste, hear, see, or smell. So everybody can just, everything becomes a question of objects. All there are sense perceptual objects, how you relate to those objects, and these objects define your existence. but there's no higher principle bounding everything. Now, Dante, he has a certain conception of God. It's a Christian God. We're going to be talking about Shakespeare's play Troilus and Cressida, which is about the Trojan War. So it's about Homer and the war raging between the Greeks and the Trojans. So Dante's conception of God, it's not a pagan God, it's a Christian God, where this idea of the intelligibility of man and his being able to understand the universe he lives in, being able to discover the principles that govern it, that's what uniquely defines him. And that's uniquely the source of his happiness, of his freedom. It's his ability to discover those laws, to know his creator, to know the intentions of his creator. But if you look at these are the souls in Dante's Inferno, in hell, which we're going to see many different examples. We see them every day, so I don't really need to show you more examples, but a specific one from Dante. The Greeks, they have their pagan gods. Are people familiar with Homer's Odyssey, the Trojan War? Yes? Est-ce que tu as déjà entendu de Homer? Homer? Okay. So the gods, c'est le caprice complet. Les dieux d'Olympe, c'est juste, ils font qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent. Les Grecs et les Troyens sont en train de se battre et les dieux d'Olympe veulent que les Grecs gagnent. Mais certaines personnes, il y a certains de les soldats dans les Troyens qui sont partiellement, qui ont été nés partiellement des dieux, donc sont capables de faire un compromis, parlent à certains dieux qui s'en vont pour essayer de jouer un tour sur Zeus, pour que pendant que Zeus a son dos tourné parce qu'il parle à un autre dieu, l'autre dieu est capable d'aider les Troyens, tels que les Grecs, ils ont failli perdre, tous leurs bateaux se font brûler jusqu'à temps que Zeus il se réveille et ils disent « Oh my God! Ils sont en train de gagner, puis ils s'en viennent, puis ils s'enragent, puis ils ramènent le jeu, ils les rattrapent, quoi. » Mais c'est complètement le caprice, c'est complètement irrationnel. Puis les principes qui gouvernent l'univers, dans cette conception païenne, this pagan conception of the universe is total chaos. There's no connection between you and the gods. Et voilà qu'est-ce que je voulais. La première, the first quote. I'll just stick to English so I don't get too. Cressida. Troilus and Cressida. The play is called Troilus and Cressida. It's between two people, right, who have this love affair. You know, this kind of love game. They're chasing each other, and finally they're together. But it's not really about them, because the whole time you have this war raging on where everybody's dying. People are just getting murdered constantly. So many people are dying. But Shakespeare, he reveals something to you about how these people are thinking, which is the key. This is what Dante's getting at as well. This is that you have to be able to demonstrate what are the underlying principles of how people are thinking. You have to dare to actually challenge those. Because as long as you just respond to what people say, what they do, you're not challenging them on what their idea of humanity actually is. Who are they? Knowing that we don't live forever, what is our purpose? What is our intention? What are we actually doing? So Cressida, she says, "Perchance, my lord," speaking to Troilus, "I show more craft than love, and fell so roundly to a large confession to angle for your thoughts. But you are wise, or else you love not. For to be wise and love exceeds man's might. That dwells with the gods above." Very interesting statement. What do people think about that? People have any basic thoughts?
Well, what's the meaning? And feel so roundly to a large confession, to angle for your thoughts.
Well, she's saying that she played a trick by confessing what she thinks, as if by saying what she thinks as if she's playing a game, but when she's in fact just really unable to contain herself. She's unable to contain herself, and that's the whole thing here. But you are wise, or else you love not. You have the upper hand. You're wise because you're not in love. For to be wise in love exceeds man's might. Us puny, tiny humans, we don't have that kind of power to think rationally, or that the idea of love and reason are actually part of the same thing, that they really are the same thing. That's impossible. So he gives it to you right there. The flaw which will doom your entire society is if reason, your concept of reason and your concept of love, if they're two different worlds, then how can you ever make the right decision? What's actually driving what you do? Is it your reason, or is it you do things out of cold, calculating logic? We only have so much food available in the world, therefore this part of Africa is going to have to starve, this part of South America is going to have to starve. Sorry, I'm just crunching the numbers. People are doing that all the time, the accountants, the economists. So, most people today, they behave as if the gods of Olympus are ruling them. They say, but there's nothing we can do. Wall Street controls everything. The bankers are too powerful. People are greedy. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. Right? They're too strong. They keep saying that.
The markets are angry. We have to go for austerity and cut the budget.
Or else, the rating agencies will downgrade us. If we don't starve our poor, the rating agencies will downgrade us. We won't have access to the credit markets, which charges 30% interest rate and just kill us more. That's what just happened in Argentina with their new president. He says, we're going to make sure we have access to the credit markets. We're going to pay these bondholders in full. They bought our bonds pennies on the dollar. We're going to give them the full price because we believe in the free market. So that's satanic. And anybody who actually loves humanity could never let something like that happen. So you see, their way of thinking is totally insane. It lacks something. Because they're not able to think outside of the bounds, of the constraints that they're given. And so this is the whole key. In Dante, has everybody heard of Dante's Divine Comedy? Okay. La comédie de Dante, as-tu déjà entendu parler de ça? Et toi?
Pouvez-vous répéter s'il vous
La
plaît?
comédie de Dante, le poète italien. Non. C'est bien, c'est pour que je le sache, il n'y a pas de problème. Well, I'll just continue in English. Sorry, I'll continue in
Ok,
English.
c'est ça, je suis désolée.
In Dante, it's his trip from the inferno, from hell to paradise, and how he's getting there. He just wakes up, finds himself in hell. Pretty traumatizing experience. But he's not dead. He's in hell, but he's the first time a living soul has made it into the underworld, and now he's being taken through this journey because he has somebody who's calling him, who's waiting for him, Beatrice, who is the love of his life, who died in real life, in his real life, when they were still somewhat young. And so there's this whole metaphor that he's going to meet Beatrice, he's going to paradise. But it's not easy. And throughout, he's being confronted with all these sinners, all these people who are made completely small by their lust, their greed, right? Their hypocrisy, their gluttony, their prodigality. And he's asking them questions. He's investigating. He's saying he wants to know why people are there. Who were they in their lifetime? And he's accusing all sorts of people. The popes are in hell. He's meeting the popes in hell and everything, who are there for all sorts of bad things. But as he gets higher, then he's going into purgatory, where he's to be cleansed. He gets out of hell, and purgatory is an uphill climb. Now the thing is that it's kind of like where most people are at, where they know they're doing certain things wrong, or they know they're not a perfect person, or that they could be better, but they're not necessarily doing the things they would have to become that better person. And it's very hard to get there, where you actually recognize you're doing something wrong and you improve yourself. But the thing about purgatory is that as he climbs higher, it gets easier. So the incline, the more inclined it gets, the easier it gets. The more he's able to actually challenge his own thinking and to understand the paradoxes of human mortality, of the human condition by talking to all these people, the easier his climb gets. And even throughout paradise, he's experimenting, he's asking questions. Most of paradise is it, if you read the Bible, if you read the Quran, but what is paradise? You know, you just ripped it out of the tree, freshest, ripest fruit you could ever imagine. You just bite into it, grows right back. You know, you just have everything you could possibly desire. All your desires are fulfilled. All those things that you weren't supposed to do, or that you were supposed to hold back on planet Earth, now just go crazy, basically. But in Dante, he's struggling with certain questions about the nature of mankind. And so I'm saying that because today you have, if you think about this, if you think about our culture today, it's romanticism. It's all about sense perceptions. Whereas in Dante, in Shakespeare, it's the character's ability, the individual's ability to challenge his sense perceptions, to go through, to challenge the higher questions, right? Which is actually defining their development. The romantic doesn't care. They hate experimentation. They hate to call into question their feelings. They hate to call into question their perceptions. They hate to call into question what the media says. They hate to call into question what their teacher says, because that means they actually have to do work. They actually have to find out the truth for themselves. They hate that. It's totally not convenient for them. Why? Well, they got a party. You know, it's Friday night. You know, I got a party in like 2 hours. I don't have time for this shit. That's people today. So the question of Dante going into hell and facing the axioms which hold people down, their conceptions which define who they are, which are the things that are destroying them. The whole idea of going into hell is you being able to confront your own axioms, confront the hell of your axioms, which are driving you to destruction, and to actually free yourselves from that by reaching a higher conception of the universe, a higher conception of what he defines as paradise, which is his pursuit of understanding the way the universe truly works. That this is what makes us free. It's our ability to develop Africa, right? To develop the world through space exploration, to make new discoveries. That's freedom. If a child doesn't have the right to learn how the world works and his ability to use his mind to discover that, he's a total slave. You're enslaving the children. Where, what are they going to be doing? Well, they're going to be running to the next closest party, because that's all there is. There's only sense perception. All these sense perceptual objects, that's all you have. So we need to break this. And Shakespeare is quite a genius at this, right? You see, but you are wise, or else you love not. For to be wise in love exceeds man's might. That dwells with the gods above. Now you have one character here, Hector, who has virtue. He's actually noble in the real sense that he's actually thinking about this war has been going on for years and years. So many people have died, and it's over Helen of Troy, which is what I forgot to mention before. And so Helen was stolen. She's supposed to be the most beautiful woman that anybody could have ever laid eyes upon. and she belonged to the Greeks, to the Greek king, and she was stolen by one of the Trojans because the Greeks had stolen one of their ants. So they went, they stole the wife of the king, Menelaus, and so the war is all over this woman, which the Trojans refused to give up, to relinquish, and therefore the Greeks are just unleashing an onslaught. And so Cassandra, who has foresight, she can foresee the future. She sings, "Cry, Trojans, cry! Lend me 10,000 eyes, and I will fill them with prophetic tears." Hector says, "Peace, sister, peace. Virgins and boys, mid-aged and wrinkled eld, soft infancy, that nothing canst but cry. Add to my clamors. Let us pay the times of moiety of that mass of moan to come. Cry, Trojans, cry. Practice your eyes with tears. Troy must not be, nor goodly Ilion stand. Our firebrand brother Paris, who stole Helen, burns us all. Cry, Trojans, cry. A Helen and a woe. Cry, cry, Trojans. Troy burns, or else let Helen go. Troy burns, or else let Helen go." So, Hector, which maybe you see a bit of yourself in our friend Hector here, he's speaking with his father Priam, who's the king of Troy. And Priam says, "After so many hours, lives, speeches spent, thus once again, says Nestor from the Greeks, deliver Helen, and all damage else, as honor, loss of time, travail, expense, wounds, friends, and what else dear that is consumed in hot digestion of this cormorant war, shall be struck off. Hector, what say you to it?" So he's asking, what do you think? We could call it all off right now. We just have to give up Helen. And Hector says, "Though no man lesser fears the Greeks than I, as far as touches my particular, yet, dread Priam, there is no lady of more softer bowels, more spongy to suck in the sense of fear, more ready to cry out, 'Who knows what will follow?' than Hector is. The wound of peace is surety, surety secure. But modest doubt is called the beacon of the wise, the tent that searches to the bottom of the worst. Let Helen go. Since the first sword was drawn about this question, every tithe soul, amongst many thousand Disneys, hath been as dear as Helen, I mean of ours. If we have lost so many tenths of ours, to guard a thing not ours nor worth to us, had it our name the value of 1/10, what merit is in that reason which denies the yielding of her up?" So he's saying so many of our people have died, the equivalent, even if they're just the equivalent of 1/10 of her, there's so many that it's still, we should be letting her go. This is too much. And so he speaks with his brothers, and we won't read the whole thing, but just to give you a flavor, what do Troilus, who's in love with this girl Cressida, who's too weak to be wise and to love, Troilus says, I'll read from there. We do not throw in unrespective seed because we now are full. It was thought meet Paris should do some vengeance on the Greeks. Your breath of full consent bellied his sails. The seasoned winds old wrangler took a truce and did him service. He touched the port's desire, and for an old aunt whom the Greeks held captive, he brought a Grecian queen, whose youth and freshness wrinkles Apollo's, and makes stale the morning. Why keep her? Why keep her? So he's saying, you fully supported us, to Hector. You fully supported us in going to get her. She's the most beautiful woman. She, very beautifully says, she whose youth and freshness wrinkles Apollo's, and makes the stale morning, and makes stale the morning. The most impossibly beautiful thing. And he's saying, now you want to change when you had our full support. And he basically goes on to say, well, you supported it then, so you can't change now. Your logic, this was totally worth it. because of who she was, because of what happened, and now you're saying it's not worth it anymore because people have died. You're basically, your honor is in question. Your lack of courage is in question. And Paris, why brother Hector, the guy who actually has Helen, who's barely ever fighting? He's always just in his palace with Helen. Why brother Hector? We may not think the justness of each act, such and no other than the event doth form it. The justness of any act, of any decision, is based on nothing else than what ends up happening. If you clean up, if you commit fraud and steal from everybody, you go around town with a gun, and you make a lot of money, you get a lot of loot, and you don't get caught, well, that was a good thing. The outcome was totally successful. So you see the sophistry of these people, right, who are, they're just arguing based on logical, just logical arguments, but the ability of the other people to challenge this kind of sophistry is wanting. So you have it in Hector. Hector says, Hector is challenging all this. He's the only one. Just think of yourself maybe when you're talking to people, having a political discussion, and you see what's going on in the world. And he says, Paris and Troilus, you have both said well, and on the common question now in hand, have glozed but superficially, not much unlike young men, whom Aristotle thought until unfit to hear moral philosophy. The reasons you allege do more conduce to the hot passion of distempered blood than to make up free determination twixt right and wrong. For pleasure and revenge have ears more deaf than adders to the voice of any true decision. Adders are snakes, so have ears more deaf than vipers to the voice of any true decision. Nature craves all dues be rendered to their owners. Now, what nearer debt in all humanity than wife is to husband, Helen belonging to Menelaus? If this law of nature be corrupted through affection, through passion, and that great minds of partial indulgence to their benumbed wills resist the same, there is a law in each well-ordered nation, even if people can't reason and just follow the basic line of thought for why this is wrong. He says there are laws. There is a law in each well-ordered nation to curb those raging appetites that are most obedient and refractory. If Helen then be wife to Sparta's king, as it is known she is, these moral laws of nature and of nations speak aloud to have her back returned. Thus to persist in doing wrong extenuates not wrong, but makes it much more heavy. Hector's opinion is this in way of truth. Yet nevertheless, my sprightly brethren, I propend to you in resolution to keep Helen still. For 'tis a cause that hath no mean dependence upon our joint and several dignities. With all that said, we have laws even in our own town, in our own land, which says you're not allowed to steal somebody's wife. We're not even respecting our own laws to do this. But after all that, and how you guys are just young and foolish and you're just being driven by passion, he says, but you know what? I don't really have a say in this anyways. You or I, our joint and several dignities, our individual opinions don't really matter. So go ahead. And you see that this is what happens. This is the fatal flaw where he tried to challenge the axioms of his society. He tried to challenge the opinions that people were saying. And as soon as he got into a bit of a confrontation, ultimately he said, oh, well, it's not really up to me anyways. So this kind of smallness, right, where they submit to the Olympian-like opinions of their society and don't have the courage to challenge them. This is what leads to hell. This is what Dante is confronting as hell, is being able to actually go to a higher conception of humanity, which demonstrates not the fallacy of one guy's arguing with him, but demonstrates that their whole way of thinking is wrong, because it's not based on natural law. What happens with his sister? She comes in, Cassandra, where is my brother Hector? Andromache, here, sister, armed and bloody and intent, consort with me in loud and dear petition. Pursue we him on knees, for I have dreamed of bloody turbulence, and this whole night hath nothing but shapes and forms of slaughter. Cassandra, oh, 'tis true. Hector, ho, bid my trumpet sound. No notes of sally for the heavens, sweet brother. No notes of war, trumpets. And Hector, begone, I say. The gods have heard me swear. Cassandra, the gods are deaf to hot and peevish vows. They are polluted offerings, more abhorred than spotted livers in the sacrifice. Andromache, oh, be persuaded. Do not count it wholly to hurt by being just. It is as lawful, for we would give much to use violent thefts and rob in the behalf of charity. Cassandra, it is the purpose that makes strong the vow. But vows to every purpose must not hold. Unarmed, sweet Hector. Hector, hold you still, I say. Mine honor keeps the weather of my fate. Life every man holds dear, but the brave man holds honor far more precious dear than life. Here's Cassandra. She actually comes in, right, and says, no, the gods that you're talking about, they don't exist. The gods are deaf to hot and peevish deeds. It's the purpose which makes strong the vow. She's actually questioning what's the whole basis of this war in the first place, right? There is no legitimacy to this. Why would the gods support this? What purpose would the gods have in supporting this? There's no purpose. This is not bringing anything good. We're our children, everybody's going to be slaughtered. Stop. But he says, my honor, he can't break out of this. They have this idea of honor today. It's like today, we have the same thing with opinion. What's my family going to think? What are my friends going to think? LaRouche is an anti-Semite. You have to throw these things in. And you don't want to be caught with somebody like that, somebody weird. So you see that the failure of these people to actually challenge their being unable to recognize what's guiding their thinking is the thing that destroys them. The only thing that could possibly set them free. And so I would leave it on that. I would say that this is the culture that we're dealing with today, this romanticism, where people are dominated by their relationship to their senses, and they're unable to break out of that. But if you're to challenge that, you have to have a real conception of what humanity is, like a Dante, like a Shakespeare, or like a Da Vinci would do. And this is using the classical method of composition is really the way to do it. So that's why we're the Schiller Institute. And if people really want to get a sense of these things, they should get more active and start using our material to actually challenge people on the world that they think they're living in. So I'd leave it at that, but we can have some questions. No matter how hard one tries, you're preparing a presentation, you get up and you're about to talk, and everything that you planned, basically, you have to throw it out the window and just reorganize yourself as things go.
Improvise.
Yeah, to some extent. So I just, if you'll just humor me for a moment, I just need, there was a lot said, and based on what Bob, the note, finished on, if you think about this question of space, the question of being on the moon, for me, it shows us how humanity is still in such an early stage in its development. The fact that we're only on the first closest celestial body, right, the moon, and most of the universe has not been explored, most of our solar system or galaxy has not really been touched. For me, it gives us a sense of how young we all are, which is great, because everybody's obsessed with being eternally young these days, so I guess that's a good thing. And there's many ways that we can, because today the population is totally blinded by the culture, a culture which is dominated by sense perception. And what we mean by that is that it's dominated by the immediate feelings and impulses of everybody. It's dominated by the immediate stories that the media puts out, the narratives. Everything is dominated by a just perceptual and reactionary way of thinking. People are not actually thinking. They're just taking things in, they're taking information in, they're taking sense perceptions in, and they're trying to just, that's defining their world. So Mike Billington said in the first presentation how people so quickly fall for the propaganda against China. They're eating cats, oh my God, they're a dictatorship. And then you say, well, hang on a second, there's all sorts of different things going on. And somebody will basically say, don't you know what a dictator is? As if the word dictator defines what's actually happening in reality. They have no sense of reality, they're just reacting. So if you want to think about something like the space program, which brings into question the future of humanity, the way people think today, or don't think, a future like that is very hard to imagine. A future in space for humanity is something light years away, when in fact the jump from having a species which is totally earthbound to a species which went into the solar system with the moon landing and all that happened within a few decades. Totally changed mankind's relationship and place in the universe. So today we have a not shortage of resources, shortage of imagination, shortage of ideas, shortage of minds who can actually think about the future. And so I'm going to use this question of art, this question of poetry, to basically give a sense of how we can actually challenge people's minds, challenge their imagination. This is the purpose of great art. This is what art can do. This is what the great German poet Friedrich Schiller, which is what our organization, the Schiller Institute, is named after. He says that the point of art is to ennoble mankind. And that the thing that's unique about art is that it's not hostage to the opinions of the mass. It's not hostage to the arbitrary authority of what one critic says, or what some other modern artist thinks is art, or modern interpretations of things. Beauty is always beauty. It's something that's eternal. And this can actually be used to stir within mankind a feeling of real truth, of something that's beyond the senses, which only human beings can actually experience. So this was further in my presentation, but why don't we, with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself, thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. So he's talking about this idea that it's good to it's good to breed. It's good to produce children in the sense that you're actually producing something that continues after you. But then in the second quatrain, the second set of 4 lines, which starts with, but thou contracted thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. Thy light's flame is self-substantial. So you seem to be as if contracted to your own eyes, to your own image of yourself. Feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. So in a sense, one's own ego is the thing keeping this person going. It's not their concern with the future as such, but really with just their own existence, their own personal individual existence. There's no regard for the future as such, and their role and their place in that future, whether they have one or not. Thyself, thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel, denying yourself of the natural right to have children, to give birth, to participate in the future. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring. Herald, so like messenger, greeter to the gaudy spring, bright, beautiful spring. Within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste in niggarding. Niggarding is like being cheap. So you're wasting, and to start with it, I guess I would just read it, because I want to know what people think. I'm going to need your help for this. So this is Shakespeare's first sonnet in his series of 155 sonnets, elaborating a concept of humanity, which totally goes against everything that people believe in today, that people submit to. And we can do some translation or a discussion of what he's actually saying in terms of the words he's using. So, from fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. Thou that art now the world's fresh ornament, and only herald to the gaudy spring, within thine own bud buryest thy content, and tender churl makest waste in niggarding. Pity the world, or else this glutton be, to eat the world's due, by the grave from thee. Okay. I need to know, what do people think about this? What are people, how would people react? Yes, Evan.
To me, it feels a little bit like he's saying that, like, we set our limits on ourselves, and like the middle is kind of like it.
Okay, in terms of what?
Self-substantial fuel, making a famine where abundance lies. Thyself thy foe, to thy sweet self too cruel. So like,
What are they being cruel about, though? What's the? It helps to read these things a second time. Shall we read it a second time?
Yeah.
Now, from fairest creatures, we desire increase. Increase means, I should have said this, increase means to become pregnant, to give birth. So to desire increase, the woman's womb increases. So from fairest creatures, we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. Eduardo, is that clear what he's saying?
Yeah.
What is it he's saying?
Continuity.
Yeah, we
As
wish
if it's
we wish everyone to have kids, so by the time they get old and deceased, well, at least their heir will have the memory of them. So
Okay.
Well, as if he's saying that we wish that the most beautiful ones have children, so that beauty never dies somehow. Like they transfer the beauty to their children, etc. So through generations, as if it's a sort of discrimination. Like only beautiful should.
Only the elites, only
somehow,
the beautiful
somehow.
people get to breed. That kind of sounds,
Yeah.
we've heard that before, but it didn't work out that well in history. So we want to give Shakespeare the benefit of the doubt and imagine he's not thinking that way exactly, like he must have some other intention. So just to reread and to continue. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. But thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feedest thy light's flame